You don't belong here. Bradley Pierce's voice cut through the soft hum of the luxury hotel bar like a sharp gust of wind through a quiet courtyard. Monique Taylor paused at the threshold, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, the glow from the crystal chandeliers reflecting off her calm expression. She wasn't here to argue, not yet. Just a woman in simple attire, a tailored black blouse, dark jeans, polished loafers, carrying nothing but her quiet confidence. Guests shifted in their seats, some lifting their glasses to pause mid-conversation, others glancing up from their phones, sensing the tension before they understood it. Bradley crossed his arms, leaning casually against the mahogany bar, blonde hair perfectly styled, a smirk playing on his lips as if he held the authority of the entire city in his palm. "Sir, she has a reservation," muttered a young bartender behind him, unsure how to navigate the sudden storm in their usually controlled space. Monique's gaze didn't flinch. It scanned the room, calm, deliberate, reading the faces of the patrons and staff alike. The murmurs of curiosity started to rise, a low ripple weaving through the tables. She approached the bar with measured steps, each one asserting presence without demand, carrying the same energy she had on her first board meeting years ago, the same silent power that had built a hospitality empire from scratch. Bradley waved off the bartender, leaning closer, his voice lowering but still sharp. "I said you don't belong here. Maybe you need to wait." Monique stopped a few feet away, setting her hands lightly on the edge of the bar, and simply raised an eyebrow, a subtle tilt that spoke volumes, a quiet confidence that demanded recognition without a single word. A woman at a corner table nudged her companion, whispering, "Is she serious? Who does she think she is?" A few guests subtly began lifting their phones, fingers hovering over record buttons, drawn in by the quiet storm unfolding in front of them. Monique's thoughts briefly flashed back to all the times she had been dismissed. First apartment showing at 23, her first hotel acquisition at 29, moments where perception tried to outweigh reality. She breathed slowly, letting the weight of the years of experience settle into the calm that radiated from her like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. Bradley, noticing the growing attention, leaned back, trying to reclaim control, adjusting his posture as if to say, "I'm still in charge here." But the shift in energy was palpable. Patrons were beginning to sense that the quiet woman in front of them might not be who she appeared to be. Monique placed a single hand on her phone in her bag, a slight tap sending a discreet message to her assistant, initiating a protocol that would soon make the bar screens flash her ownership credentials. A faint collective intake of breath rippled across the room, anticipation thick as the bar staff exchanged uneasy glances, beginning to understand that this wasn't an ordinary guest interaction. The bar seemed smaller, the air tighter, and every eye turned toward her, sensing the calm before the storm of revelation. Monique's lips curved into the slightest, almost imperceptible smile, and in that instant, the room held its collective breath, caught between disbelief and curiosity, the promise of a twist that would leave everyone in awe, silently daring them to continue underestimating the quiet power standing before them. Bradley Pierce straightened his posture, clearly aware of the growing attention around him, his eyes darting from Monique to the small groups of patrons now whispering and pointing discreetly toward their phones. The young bartender who had first attempted to intervene shifted nervously behind the counter, unsure whether to side with the manager or respect the quiet authority emanating from Monique. She did not raise her voice, she did not gesture aggressively, yet every motion was deliberate, every subtle nod commanding attention. Guests who had been mid-conversation paused, their forks and glasses frozen in motion, sensing the tension and anticipating what might happen next. A woman in a corner began lifting her phone, a soft glow illuminating her face as she recorded, while a man at the high-top table exchanged a glance with his companion, both leaning forward, their curiosity piqued by the calm defiance in Monique's stance. Monique took a slow step forward, her gaze sweeping the room, acknowledging the whispers and the flickers of cameras, not as a plea, but as a quiet assertion of presence. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered, interrupted by the subtle shift in energy, a sense that the usual rules no longer applied, that this was no ordinary encounter. Monique allowed herself a brief pause, Recalling the first hotel she had acquired alone at 29, the late nights negotiating contracts, the endless meetings with skeptics who underestimated her because of her youth and her appearance. That same energy, the lessons learned from past dismissals and doubts, now flowed through her, steady and unshakable. She reached into her bag, fingers brushing the phone as she activated a secure communication line to her executive assistant, initiating a protocol that would validate her authority in real time. The bar screens flickered momentarily, then glowed with information confirming her ownership credentials, an elegant reminder that the balance of power had shifted without a single raised voice. Patrons leaned closer, some standing to get a better view, the atmosphere thick with a mix of surprise, disbelief, and admiration. Bradley's expression hardened, a fleeting attempt to reclaim control, but each second Monique remained composed, the air around her charged with the quiet certainty of someone who had built empires through strategy and patience. Conversations hushed, eyes fixed on her as she placed a hand lightly on the bar, a signal of calm authority, her subtle smile a prelude to the recognition that would soon sweep the room. Every element of the scene, the polished marble, the soft lighting, the murmurs of the guests, coalesced around her presence, amplifying the contrast between the manager's strained authority and her poised dominance. A few guests exchanged glances, understanding that they were witnessing the unfolding of a rare moment, the kind that would be recounted later, a study in composed power and unspoken influence. Monique's mind remained focused, the phone call completed, the validation received. Yet she did not immediately gloat or boast. She allowed the quiet to do its work, letting the room absorb the realization that the woman they had doubted and attempted to dismiss controlled the very space they occupied. In that suspended moment, the subtle nods, the cautious smiles, the lifted cameras, all bore witness to the unspoken message. True power required no loud proclamation, only unwavering presence and undeniable authority, leaving the bar patrons in suspense, eager to see the next step in the quiet, inevitable assertion of her control. Bradley Pierce shifted uncomfortably, his attempt to project control crumbling as Monique Taylor remained seated, poised, her presence a quiet storm in the midst of the bar. The subtle glow from the chandeliers highlighted the calm in her expression, the faint curve of her lips hinting at a knowledge he did not yet grasp. Guests leaned forward in their seats, some discreetly recording with their phones, others whispering to neighbors, the soft hum of conversation giving way to anticipation. Monique's eyes scanned the room with deliberate care, observing reactions, noting the slight hesitation of the staff who had tried to dismiss her moments ago. She remembered the countless times in her life she had been underestimated, from first interviews at small boutique hotels to early board meetings where her suggestions were ignored, and each memory added to the depth of her stillness. Her fingers brushed against the surface of the bar, a subtle gesture that anchored her in the room, commanding attention without a word. The patrons sensed it, the subtle gravity of a person whose experience and authority could not be challenged by mere assumptions or appearances. A discreet notification from her assistant confirmed the system had updated, verifying her status as the owner of the property, and the bar screen subtly displayed the information without any announcement, a quiet but undeniable confirmation of her authority. Bradley's posture stiffened, the tension in his jaw and the tightening of his shoulders betraying his awareness that the balance of power had shifted. He glanced at the staff, their faces showing unease, some averting their eyes, realizing that the usual rules did not apply in this moment. Monique remained serene, each breath measured, each movement deliberate, radiating the calm confidence of someone who had built an empire from determination, intellect, and patience. The soft clinking of glasses, once casual, now punctuated the silence as all attention converged on her, the subtle energy in the room thick with anticipation. A patron leaned toward a neighbor, whispering softly, "She is in control of this place, we just did not know it before," while another subtly angled a camera to capture the scene unfolding. Monique tilted her head slightly, acknowledging the observers without disrupting the composure that held the room in suspension. Bradley opened his mouth to speak again, words forming and fading, the authority he had relied upon dissolving under the weight of verified truth. Guests shifted in their seats, some standing to get a better view, others simply watching, eyes wide, sensing that this was a moment of reckoning not just for the manager, but for the space itself. Monique's calm radiated outward, transforming the bar from a space of casual leisure to a stage of quiet revelation, where the recognition of her presence and authority rippled through everyone present, leaving an unspoken promise of accountability and the inevitability of respect being accorded to the one who had earned it through years of skill, strategy, and unwavering patience. Bradley Pierce finally straightened fully, attempting to mask the uncertainty creeping into his posture, his hands subtly fidgeting with the cocktail napkin he had been holding, but the room no longer responded to him. Monique Taylor remained seated, her presence steady, commanding, each small movement deliberate, her eyes scanning the room with the calm confidence of someone who had mastered the art of quiet authority. Patrons now leaned forward, some whispering to one another, others capturing the unfolding scene on their phones, the subtle hum of curiosity and anticipation filling the space where casual chatter had once existed. Monique recalled every moment when she had been doubted, every conference room where her ideas had been questioned, every property showing where she had been underestimated, and she drew strength from those memories, letting them infuse the stillness she radiated. The bar staff exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the usual methods of asserting control no longer applied, and Bradley's attempts to speak were cut short by the collective awareness of the guests that a shift had occurred, a silent acknowledgement of power that did not need declaration. Monique placed a hand lightly on the edge of the bar, her touch a small anchor in the midst of the tension, the subtle pressure reinforcing the sense of her command. The discreet message she had sent earlier had triggered updates on the bar's digital displays, confirming her ownership, and the information flashed softly on the screens without a word, a quiet but undeniable proof of authority. Bradley's eyes widened slightly, the recognition that the assumptions he had made about her status were incorrect settling in, while the staff's earlier confidence wavered. The guests sensed the transformation, the subtle shift from ordinary social interaction to an unspoken lesson in authority and respect, their attention captured by the composed figure before them. A few patrons exchanged knowing looks, their curiosity turning into admiration as they realized that Monique's calm demeanor was not passivity, but a deliberate exercise of influence, honed over years of experience and strategic thinking. The soft clinks of glasses and the faint rustle of chairs seemed to fade into the background, leaving the focus entirely on the measured, deliberate presence of Monique, her every gesture observed, every glance absorbed by the room. The realization spread slowly through the bar, a quiet ripple that touched each individual, creating a sense of awe at the understated yet undeniable assertion of control, leaving Bradley and his team momentarily suspended in a recognition of their misjudgment. Monique's breathing remained slow and steady, her posture unwavering, as she allowed the room to absorb the change, letting the stillness and subtle proof of her position communicate what words never could. Patrons and staff alike began to feel the weight of her presence, understanding instinctively that the space had been quietly reclaimed, and the unspoken message was clear: respect and authority come not from volume or intimidation, but from unwavering confidence and verified truth. The bar settled into a hushed anticipation, each person caught in the tension of recognition, waiting to see how the composed figure of Monique Taylor would continue to navigate the room she had quietly dominated, the promise of revelation lingering in the air, drawing all eyes forward, silently compelling attention to her next move. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, a wave of curiosity and disbelief spreading through the luxury hotel bar as Monique Taylor maintained her poised demeanor. Bradley Pierce, once confident in his assumed authority, now shifted uneasily, glancing at the subtle confirmation on the bar screens that verified her ownership, his smirk fading into a strained expression. Monique allowed a brief pause, letting the weight of the moment settle, the quiet strength in her posture drawing all eyes, commanding attention without a single raised voice. The staff exchanged furtive glances, their prior certainty dissolving under the undeniable proof, while patrons instinctively leaned forward, some adjusting their cameras to capture the revelation, their whispers a mix of astonishment and admiration. Monique's thoughts briefly wandered to the countless times she had been underestimated dismissed, or doubted simply because of appearances, and she drew on those memories to reinforce her calm authority, allowing the room to absorb the shift naturally. She took a measured step toward the bar, her movements precise and deliberate, signaling control without aggression, a subtle gesture that anchored the space around her presence. Bradley cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of control, but the energy in the room had irrevocably shifted, every subtle movement of Monique conveying competence and power that his words could not counter. The gentle hum of the bar, once dominated by casual conversation, now vibrated with tension and focus as all eyes tracked her every move, absorbing the silent narrative of capability and verification that she embodied. Monique reached lightly for her phone, a quiet tap to her executive assistant, triggering a real-time verification protocol that displayed additional ownership details discreetly on the bar monitors, reinforcing her authority without a single declaration. Guests began exchanging astonished glances, the air thick with realization, while the staff's posture shifted from assured to tentative, the subtle but undeniable proof of her ownership altering the social dynamic of the room completely. Monique allowed herself a brief, controlled smile, acknowledging the shift, and the soft lighting accentuated the calm power in her expression, a presence that could not be denied or diminished. Patrons whispered to each other, the scene becoming a study in composure and authority, the quiet assertion of control rippling through every corner of the bar, as Bradley and the staff silently recalibrated their understanding of the space and the person who now held sway over it. Every glance, every small motion, communicated her mastery of the room, and the murmurs gradually evolved into a respectful silence, punctuated by the subtle hum of recording devices, capturing the exact moment when quiet confidence transformed into recognized authority, leaving everyone present anticipating what Monique Taylor would do next, and how she would continue to navigate the room she had so quietly but completely reclaimed. The atmosphere in the luxury hotel bar shifted again, a subtle vibration of anticipation threading through every conversation and movement as Monique Taylor remained the center of attention, poised and unshakable. Bradley Pierce, once attempting to control the room with words and gestures, now found his authority quietly eroding, the flicker of uncertainty betraying his usual composure. Monique's calm presence dominated the space, her posture relaxed yet commanding, radiating a quiet confidence that drew the eyes and attention of everyone in the room. Guests adjusted in their seats, some rising slightly to capture angles on their phones, while others leaned forward, whispers passing among them as they attempted to process the unfolding shift in dynamics. Monique allowed the moment to linger, letting the slow accumulation of recognition and realization ripple through the bar, each small gesture, each measured step, reinforcing the undeniable presence she commanded. Her mind briefly revisited the early days of her career, the countless negotiations where she had been dismissed, underestimated, and ignored, the persistent doubts and biases she had overcome, and the meticulous patience that had guided her every decision. Each memory contributed to the strength in her calm, the deliberate control over her environment and the people within it. The bar staff now moved hesitantly, unsure of how to respond, their prior confidence diminished by the visible proof of her authority displayed on the screens and the subtle acknowledgement of the guests. Bradley attempted another word, but it faltered, his tone carrying the faintest tremor of unease, the realization dawning that he was no longer the one directing the room. Monique placed a hand lightly on the counter, a gesture of measured dominance, commanding without need for loud assertion, the minimal movement signaling total control. The patrons around her responded instinctively, some whispering confirmations to each other, others simply observing, their attention entirely absorbed by the subtle yet powerful shift occurring before them. The gentle clinking of glassware, once a background rhythm, now punctuated the quiet tension as eyes remained fixed on Monique. Every motion she made conveying the steady certainty of her command. She allowed herself a faint smile, the smallest acknowledgement that she was fully aware of the change she had orchestrated, the recognition circulating among the guests and staff alike. Conversations dwindled to hushed murmurs, the bar's atmosphere dense with realization and quiet admiration, each observer recognizing the controlled authority she exuded. Monique's presence, calm and deliberate, had converted the space into a stage where respect was no longer requested but silently demanded, every subtle cue in her posture and gaze reinforcing the undeniable proof of her position. Guests leaned forward, staff hesitated, and Bradley's expression revealed the weight of his misjudgment, all while Monique allowed the room to fully absorb the significance of her quiet yet total command, the anticipation of the next move lingering palpably, every individual aware that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted and that the room now belonged to her influence and control. Bradley Pierce shifted once more, a subtle tension in his shoulders as he realized the room no longer responded to him. The gentle hum of conversation now focused entirely on Monique Taylor, who remained poised at the bar, her calm presence filling every corner of the space with quiet authority. Monique allowed a moment to pass, letting the awareness of her control settle in the minds of everyone present, each patron and staff member subconsciously recalibrating their understanding of the hierarchy in the room. Her gaze moved slowly across the bar, noting the small gestures of uncertainty from the staff, the slight widening of eyes among the guests, and the hesitant movements of Bradley as he attempted to assert dominance that no longer existed. Monique's mind replayed the countless occasions when her ideas had been dismissed, her competence questioned, and her presence overlooked, and she drew strength from each memory, letting the accumulated patience and experience inform her measured movements and composed demeanor. Her hand lightly touched the bar, a subtle anchor in the midst of the charged atmosphere, each small gesture reinforcing the steady command she radiated without a single word. The guests leaned forward, some discreetly recording, others whispering in awe, their attention captured by the unfolding quiet spectacle of authority. Bradley cleared his throat again, a weak attempt to regain influence. But the soft glow of the bar screens displaying Monique's ownership credentials left him visibly constrained. Every glance he gave met with a composed stare that communicated both understanding and finality. The air in the bar was thick with anticipation, each patron sensing the significance of the moment, the soft clinking of glasses and the muted rustle of chairs punctuating the focused silence as the realization spread through the room. Monique allowed herself a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement to the guests and staff that the shift was complete, the subtle curvature of her lips reflecting the calm triumph of her strategy and presence. Conversations dwindled to hushed exchanges, whispers of astonishment blending with the unspoken recognition of authority that no one present could ignore. Bradley's attempts to interject faded, the staff hesitated, and Monique's measured steps across the bar floor reinforced her unassailable position, every movement deliberate, every gesture purposeful. The soft lighting accentuated her composed demeanor, creating a subtle aura that enveloped the room and directed focus toward her, the quiet power she wielded evident in every eye fixed on her. Patrons exchanged glances, understanding the scene as an illustration of competence and assured control, while the staff recognized the undeniable validation of her position and the futility of resistance. Monique's presence alone had shifted the entire dynamic of the bar, transforming it into a space where respect was demanded through calm authority rather than volume, leaving everyone in suspense, captivated by the poised, commanding figure who had reclaimed the room with deliberate elegance and quiet confidence, the tension lingering in the air as they awaited her next move. The bar was filled with a quiet anticipation as Monique Taylor remained at the center of attention, her composure absolute, each subtle movement drawing focus from the guests and staff alike. Bradley Pierce shifted uneasily behind the counter, his attempts to regain authority faltering as he noticed the subtle confirmation of her ownership reflected on the bar screens. Patrons leaned forward, some discreetly recording the unfolding moment, others whispering in low tones, the realization spreading that the space was no longer governed by assumption or appearance, but by undeniable, verified authority. Monique allowed herself a slow, measured breath, her mind reflecting on every instance in her career where patience and strategic insight had allowed her to transform doubt into influence. Each memory reinforcing the calm power she now projected. The staff, once confident in their handling of guests, now hesitated, their movements tentative, aware that the usual procedures no longer applied in the presence of someone who wielded authority quietly but absolutely. Guests adjusted their positions, some rising slightly from their seats to get better views, while others simply remained in place, eyes fixed on the poised figure who had claimed the room with elegance and discretion. Monique's hand rested lightly on the edge of the bar, a subtle gesture that conveyed control without force, the faintest shift in her posture radiating a command that permeated the space. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, words forming but failing to carry weight, the realization dawning that influence could not be asserted merely through position or tone, and that the subtle proof of ownership and competence had irreversibly shifted the dynamics of the room. The soft clinking of glasses, the hushed murmurs, and the occasional rustle of chairs created a rhythm that highlighted the tension and focus concentrated on Monique, the energy of the space shifting to align with her calm authority. Patrons exchanged looks, recognition and admiration growing as they understood that she had navigated the situation with the precision of experience and the quiet confidence of someone who commanded respect effortlessly. Every gesture, every glance, every controlled movement reinforced the undeniable presence she maintained, leaving the bar staff and manager in a moment of silent reassessment, the subtle acknowledgement of power settling across the room. Monique's expression remained serene, a slight, controlled smile hinting at the awareness of the shift she had orchestrated, the soft lighting accentuating the steady confidence she exuded. Conversations dwindled further into murmurs of astonishment, whispers acknowledging her presence and authority, while the guests and staff absorbed the reality of the space, now subtly, yet completely governed by her influence. Each individual present seemed to instinctively understand that this was a demonstration of composed power, strategic patience, and the quiet assertion of control, leaving the entire room engaged in a collective recognition that the balance of authority had irrevocably changed, with Monique Taylor at the center, guiding the room not through volume, but through undeniable presence and verified competence, the anticipation of her next measured action lingering in every attentive gaze. The tension in the luxury hotel bar had reached a delicate balance, the subtle energy of anticipation threading through every conversation and movement as Monique Taylor remained the focal point, poised and commanding, her presence transforming the space into a stage of quiet authority. Bradley Pierce, still attempting to assert control, shifted in place, his hands tightening subtly on the edge of the bar, the realization of his diminished influence evident in the slight falter of his posture. Guests leaned forward, some lifting their phones to record, others exchanging whispers that carried curiosity and astonishment, the soft murmur blending with the ambient clinks of glassware to form a rhythm that underscored the unfolding scene. Monique's gaze swept across the room with deliberate care, noting the tentative glances of the staff and the heightened attention of the patrons, every movement measured to reinforce her calm but undeniable command. She reflected briefly on the trajectory that had led her here, the early days of navigating meetings where her presence was overlooked, the countless occasions where assumptions had been made about her abilities, and she drew strength from the persistence, patience, and strategic thinking that had propelled her career forward. Her fingers lightly brushed the bar as she shifted slightly, a gesture that anchored her presence, subtle yet full of meaning, signaling authority without aggression. Bradley attempted to speak again, but his words faltered against the quiet certainty in her stance, the weight of verified ownership displayed on the bar screen subtly but unmistakably asserting her control. The patrons' attention sharpened, their whispers quieting into focused observation as they absorbed the shift, some exchanging quick glances of recognition, others raising their phones to document the moment. The bar staff moved with hesitation, aware that conventional approaches to asserting control were no longer effective, their actions measured, their confidence tempered by the visible demonstration of her authority. Monique allowed herself a brief, controlled nod, acknowledging the attention, the shift in perception, and the collective understanding settling over the room. The soft lighting accentuated her composed demeanor, her posture radiating quiet dominance that required no verbal proclamation. Conversations dwindled to murmurs, the soft rustle of movement punctuating the focused attention on her, the guests recognizing the methodical, deliberate exercise of control and influence that distinguished her presence. Every small gesture, every measured step, reinforced the message that authority and respect were earned through strategy, experience, and unwavering composure rather than volume or intimidation. Bradley and the staff were caught in a moment of reassessment, the subtle acknowledgement of her position registering with every hesitant glance and shift of posture. Patrons and employees alike became conscious of the room's transformation, understanding instinctively that the equilibrium of influence had shifted irrevocably, and that the quiet, composed figure of Monique Taylor had claimed the space with elegance, skill, and unassailable presence, leaving a palpable anticipation for how she would guide the remainder of the evening and the bar's atmosphere under her undisputed control. Monique Taylor took a slow step toward the center of the bar, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet precision, each patron and staff member acutely aware of her composed presence. Bradley Pierce, attempting to mask the strain in his posture, shifted uncomfortably, the faint flicker of doubt crossing his eyes as he realized the verification of her authority on the bar screens left him with little room to maneuver. Guests leaned forward in their seats, subtle murmurs passing among them as the realization settled. The space was no longer merely a public bar, but a stage where Monique's influence and verified ownership shaped every interaction. She allowed a measured breath, absorbing the moment, letting the accumulated attention and anticipation build naturally, reinforcing the subtle power she exuded without a single word. Her hand rested lightly on the polished surface of the bar, a gesture that anchored her presence and conveyed authority with minimal movement, her eyes meeting those of Bradley in a steady acknowledgement of the shift in control. The staff exchanged tentative glances, their previous confidence waning as the patron's focus and the discreet verification on the monitors reinforced her command, each gesture a reminder that authority could be asserted without loud proclamation. The patrons adjusted in their seats, some capturing the scene on their phones, others simply observing in quiet astonishment, the soft lighting catching reflections on glassware and marble surfaces, adding a subtle cinematic quality to the moment. Monique's mind briefly recalled the early days of her career, the countless negotiations and presentations where her presence had been underestimated, the subtle challenges she had faced, and the strategic patience that had shaped her approach to leadership. Each recollection added depth to the calm, deliberate authority she projected now, a presence that held the room in silent recognition. Bradley cleared his throat again, a weak attempt at assertion, but the weight of verified ownership and the quiet attention of the guests rendered his words ineffective, leaving him to observe the subtle but undeniable shift in power. The hum of quiet conversation and the occasional clink of glassware underscored the focused attention on Monique, the room collectively absorbing the significance of the moment, understanding that composure, strategic action, and calm authority had claimed the space fully. She allowed herself a brief, controlled smile, the smallest acknowledgement of the accomplishment, and the patrons responded with quiet nods, subtle shifts in posture, and the continued raising of cameras to record the moment. The energy in the bar was concentrated, a shared awareness of respect, recognition, and the demonstration of influence that had been orchestrated with precision. Monique's measured steps and gestures maintained the flow of authority, every movement deliberate, every glance purposeful, reinforcing the understanding that the balance of control had irrevocably shifted. Patrons and staff alike were now fully conscious of her presence and influence, their attention captured, the subtle, strategic exercise of authority transforming the room into a controlled environment where respect and recognition flowed naturally from the undeniable proof of her command. The quiet tension, anticipation, and focused observation filled the space as all eyes followed her next action, waiting to see how the composed figure would continue to navigate the bar under her complete and unspoken control, the soft ambient lighting emphasizing the elegance and decisiveness that defined her presence. The bar had settled into a tense stillness, the usual casual atmosphere replaced by an almost tangible awareness that Monique Taylor had become the center of every interaction, the pivot around which all attention now rotated. Bradley Pierce remained behind the counter, shifting subtly, attempting to recalibrate his approach, Yet every adjustment was met with the undeniable reality of Monique's verified authority displayed across the discrete screens, the subtle yet clear assertion of ownership and influence leaving no room for pretense. Guests leaned forward, some lowering their phones to glance at their neighbors, whispering observations about the quiet strength she exuded, the effortless command that required no loud proclamation, yet carried weight in every measured step and glance. Monique's eyes swept slowly across the room, pausing briefly on each staff member, noting their slight hesitations, the subtle adjustments in posture, and the flicker of acknowledgement that they were now witnessing someone whose presence alone shifted the equilibrium of the space. She drew inward, reflecting on the meticulous planning and strategic patience that had brought her to this moment, the countless scenarios in boardrooms, hotel lobbies, and conference halls where she had quietly observed, calculated, and acted with precision, the accumulation of experience now radiating outward in the calm authority that filled the bar. The subtle lighting accentuated the contours of her face and the elegance of her posture, every movement deliberate and measured, signaling control without a word, her calm anchoring the attention of the entire room. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered, the presence of evidence, verification, and Monique's unyielding composure rendering argument ineffective, the room collectively understanding that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Patrons exchanged looks, some raising their cameras again, others nodding slightly in acknowledgement, a quiet collective recognition of the strategic mastery unfolding before them. Monique allowed herself a slow, measured smile, acknowledging the subtle impact of her actions, the room absorbing the transformation of dynamics as authority and respect were silently, undeniably established. The staff, once confident in their command of the space, now hesitated, the unspoken message of ownership and competence leaving them in quiet reassessment. Every small gesture, each precise movement of Monique's hand, the controlled cadence of her steps, communicated intention and presence, reinforcing the authority she had claimed. The whispers of astonishment continued to ripple across the patrons, their attention locked, the hum of background activity replaced by the focused observation of someone mastering the room through composure and verified control. Monique's posture remained unwavering, her eyes calm but penetrating, ensuring that every observer registered the quiet assertion of dominance that no one could challenge. The collective energy of the bar had transformed, the soft clinking of glasses, the murmur of guests, and the subtle movements of staff coalescing into a single rhythm of recognition. The unspoken understanding that Monique Taylor now commanded the space through calm authority, strategic patience, and the undeniable proof of influence, leaving the entire room suspended in the anticipation of her next deliberate action. Every individual present keenly aware of the shift that had taken place. Monique Taylor's calm demeanor did not waver. As the room absorbed the full weight of her presence, every guest and staff member now acutely aware of the subtle but undeniable assertion of authority she had established. Bradley Pierce, standing behind the bar, exhaled slowly, the faint tension in his jaw betraying his awareness that his previous control was no longer effective, and that every attempt to reassert dominance had been quietly neutralized. Patrons shifted in their seats, some leaning slightly forward, others capturing the unfolding scene with careful attention on their phones, the soft glow of their screens reflecting curiosity, awe, and respect. Monique allowed herself a measured glance across the bar, noting the subtle acknowledgement in the eyes of staff who had moments ago doubted her presence, their hesitations replaced with recognition of the verified authority displayed on the screens. Each movement she made was deliberate, each step measured, a controlled choreography of influence and composure that conveyed her command without raising her voice or demanding attention overtly. The soft hum of background conversation was subdued, replaced by a focused silence in which the subtle energy of respect and recognition permeated the air, drawing all eyes toward her and allowing every individual present to comprehend the magnitude of the moment. Monique's mind revisited earlier experiences where appearances had misled others, from first impressions in meeting rooms to complex negotiations where assumptions had clouded judgment, and she drew strength from the strategic patience that had consistently guided her decisions and actions. Her hand rested lightly on the polished surface of the bar, anchoring her presence, while her eyes, steady and observant, met those of Bradley with quiet finality, signaling that the balance of influence had irrevocably shifted. Guests exchanged subtle nods, their whispers fading into a shared awareness that Monique's authority was absolute, verified, and quietly commanding, a presence that transformed the space from casual social interaction into a controlled environment of recognition and respect. The staff moved cautiously, their previous confidence tempered by the undeniable proof of her position, the measured shifts in their posture reflecting the change in dynamics, while Bradley's attempts to regain composure were met with the silent, unwavering observation of every patron. The soft lighting accentuated her poised elegance, the gentle reflections on glassware and marble surfaces enhancing the cinematic tension that hung in the room. Monique's calm, deliberate presence communicated volumes, each gesture and subtle motion reinforcing her unspoken dominance. While the patrons absorbed the scene with quiet fascination, their attention focused, their anticipation building for what would follow next. The energy in the bar, previously diffuse and conversational, had been entirely redirected, unified by the recognition of competence, authority, and strategic mastery, leaving every observer aware that Monique Taylor now guided the atmosphere and flow of the room with measured precision, her quiet command solidifying respect and establishing her influence in a manner both subtle and undeniable. The bar was now completely attentive, every gaze fixed on Monique Taylor as she stood with quiet confidence, the subtle authority in her posture resonating through the space, commanding recognition without a word. Bradley Pierce remained behind the counter, a strained expression on his face, aware that the verification of her ownership and the calm certainty she radiated had rendered his previous attempts at control obsolete. Patrons exchanged glances, whispers of astonishment rippling quietly through the room, while some discreetly raised their phones to capture the final moments of the unfolding scene, their curiosity and admiration blending into a collective acknowledgement of her influence. Monique allowed herself a slow, deliberate breath, absorbing the energy around her and letting the tension solidify into a palpable sense of accomplishment, her composure unwavering as she observed the subtle adjustments in staff and patron behavior. Every gesture, every measured step reinforced her command, the soft lighting highlighting her calm presence against the refined backdrop of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Bradley opened his mouth once more, but the words faltered, the subtle weight of verified authority and the quiet acknowledgement of the room leaving no space for him to assert influence. Monique's eyes swept over the crowd, observing the realization in their expressions, the small nods, the subtle shifts in posture, the recognition of her undeniable position, all of which reinforced the quiet authority she had established with patience and precision. The staff moved with deliberate caution, their previous confidence tempered by the undeniable proof of her ownership and the calm certainty she exuded. Guests leaned forward, whispering softly to one another, some adjusting their cameras to capture the precise moment when quiet composure transformed into recognized control, while others simply observed in silent appreciation, absorbing the demonstration of skill, strategy, and poise. Monique's hand rested lightly on the bar, her posture a blend of elegance and assurance, every subtle movement communicating competence and control, drawing the room into alignment with her presence. The soft murmur of conversation had faded into a focused attention, the gentle clinks of glassware punctuating the rhythm of realization and admiration that filled the space. Every patron and staff member sensed the quiet shift in power, the transformation of the room from a casual gathering place into a stage where respect and authority were silently but unmistakably asserted. Monique's calm smile acknowledged the room's awareness, her eyes reflecting both patience and strategic mastery, while Bradley's posture conveyed the slow acceptance of reality, the subtle but absolute recognition of her authority. The energy in the bar had been irrevocably altered, a quiet testament to her experience, her composure, and her ability to command influence without volume or force, leaving the patrons, staff, and even Bradley himself suspended in a moment of awe and anticipation for the next steps in the quietly orchestrated assertion of her control, the the soft lighting accentuating the elegance, poise, and subtle power that had quietly transformed the space into one fully aligned with her presence.